the Make It Right. Call Kyle Wright hotline. We welcome on Lance Reisland, Cleveland.com. Coach, can I also get you on the Catholicism train if, in fact, John Harbaugh agrees to come here?
My goodness, I was listening. You're all in, my friend. You are all in right now with John Harbaugh. I don't know if I'm that in. I mean, I'm in, but I don't know if I'm that in.
We got to get you on board there.
Yeah, why aren't you all the way in?
Well, I know I am in, but I'll tell you what, it's going to be, if you're going to tell me that the Browns are going to go out and hire an alpha, a guy who's going to do everything that he wants, I don't see that happening. I really don't. And if I'm wrong, I would love to be wrong, but that's kind of not the way they do things, right? They kind of do things that guys that fall in line and they kind of follow the path. So I would love John Harbaugh. Don't get me wrong. I would absolutely love him, but I just don't see it with the GM staying where he's at. I don't see it happening.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about John Harbaugh is that if he decides that Andrew Berry isn't in his culture, Andrew Berry, don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. We stay in the field.
That's what Catholics say.
Yeah.
You're saying, yeah, it was very Catholic there. You're saying he would override that. Like he's the
100%.
alpha now. Okay.
Yeah, and this is the deal.
Right.
This is the deal. Either Andrew Berry gets in line with what Harbaugh wants or he's gone, and I don't even think twice about it, Coach.
Well, I'm all in for that because he's a football guy, and I love football guys. He's a guy who bases things on feel, and there's a lot of like, this is what we got to do stuff, and obviously I appreciate that. I'm all in on Harbaugh. I think he'd be obviously the culture everybody would want to. There's a standard he has, and I think he would hold these guys to it.
If not Harbaugh, are there other head coaches or candidates that interest you the most?
Well, I really like there's a couple of guys, but if you ask me, I think Brian Flores would be the guy I really like just because of the discipline thing. And once again, I'm in for these guys who, I've never understood it. And once again, I'm older and I always listen to my dad when it comes to football, but like guys who are in charge and guys who are running the show, and you kind of defer to Brian Flores. You kind of defer to John Harbaugh, not the other way around. And, I understand how the football works. At the NFL level, I've learned from guys like you in terms of the salary cap and all that kind of stuff. But things that happen between the lines, that's got to be the football coach's job. And those kind of guys, Brian Flores, Harbaugh, those are the kind of guys, if you talk, Mike McCarthy, guys who are going to be in charge and they're the boss. I think that's, for me, those are the kind of guys that I think to kind of turn the culture to what people want, I think that's the route you got to go.
All right, what's more likely, Harbaugh ends up in Cleveland or Stefanski ends up in Baltimore?
Oh, I got to go Harbaugh in Cleveland, right? He's a Toledo guy. He's a guy that's been around in Ohio. I think, you know what? And everybody says, one thing I don't understand is when people say this is not an attractive job. Now, in terms of like if he's in charge, now, I don't think it's an attractive job. They say, hey, listen, we're going to handicap you and we're going to make all the decisions. But if you talk about if you can get your quarterback, there's a lot of pieces on the defensive part. There's pieces here that would get you excited as compared to some other places. This is a better job, in my opinion, than New York in terms of pieces on the field, the 53-man roster. So, yeah, I think him coming here is a much more likely outcome.
We do have a little bit more news coming along. Diana Rossini saying a pressure point in the John Harbaugh dismissal was his refusal to entertain any conversations about potentially moving on from Todd Monkin. So it all comes back to Monkin. It really does.
I guess we need more Monkin.
Circles back. I think Ken and Anthony would agree.
What a belief in Monkin. I mean, honestly, like that is astounding.
Future Browns offensive coordinator Todd Monkin?
That is astounding to me. Yeah, and so coach, that is what this would be then. So it would be Monkin as your OC, and then obviously Harbaugh as the main coach, and then you kind of just go from there and you see what you got.
Steve, you love that. For me, though, I love that about Harbaugh. It doesn't matter if he's that in. It's not really about Monkin. It's about those are his guys and he's in charge. And they're saying, we want you to go get a guy that we like. And that's not how those guys, those older, type coaches work. So it's really not about Monkin. It's that Monkin's his offensive coordinator. And you're not going to tell a guy like John Harbaugh who you're bringing in. And that's kind of what comes down with those guys. So, Monkin might not even be his guy, but those are, when you're on a staff, you're loyal to your staff, and that's what ends up happening. That's why when Stefanski got fired, my first thought was, man, Jim Schwartz is going to probably not, unless he's a head coach, probably won't be around next year. And that's the worst part about this Stefanski thing.
All right, so let's get to, because we don't have you for that much longer here, let's get to, now that we saw 7 full games of Shedeur Sanders, what were your takeaways from where he was game 1 to game 7, and what grade would you give him overall?
Well, I would give him, I would say he's in the B range. His catastrophic mistakes were too much. You got to protect the football when you only get 10 to 12 possessions a game. But I tell you what I liked most about this past game is I thought he played pretty poorly for almost the entire game. I thought he threw the ball very poorly. I thought his footwork wasn't great. But then that last drive, it kind of tells you, those are things that get you excited. And I always talk about impactful plays more than stats. And those last, when he hit, the throw on 3rd and 10 from his own 29, he picks up 13 yards on an Isaiah Bond out route. And he had to read that coverage because it looked like cover 2 and it wasn't. And then he hits the swing to Sampson, and then he hits the over route to Judy. Those are big throws in a game situation. That was a big drive for him. So as poorly as he played, I thought that was a very impactful play. Now, I think what he does is, can you give him the keys automatically? I'm not sure you can, but he's definitely put his name in the mix here. And for the amount of holes they have on the offense, I think you can go out. You can live with what your quarterback situation is right now. And if it's him and Dylan Gabriel and Deshaun Watson, there's worse quarterback rooms. I know Deshaun Watson's been hurt, but he's a talented guy, and he can be in that mix, in terms of a backup and things like that. So I would go. I think he's done very, very well, and I think he's given himself a chance to they can go out and get a tackle. They can go out and get some skill guys and see what this guy can do, along with some guys behind him, because he was limited. Everybody talks about his limitations. Same thing with Dylan. Dylan had the same limitations, but Shedeur was very impactful with the guys who were on the field, and I think you got to see that, and especially in that last drive, especially because he played pretty poorly all game, and then still had that drive, which I thought was his best drive of the year. That out route to Bond on 3rd and 10, I thought was his best throw of the year.
How aggressive do you feel like the Browns will be this offseason and trying to get this thing turned around as quick as possible? Or will it be a little bit of a slower burn and maybe they don't go out and get all the offensive linemen and add wide receivers, et cetera?
Well, I think the key for me is I've always felt this. It always goes back to the freshman in college as compared to a senior in college with offensive linemen. Those offensive linemen, there's a learning curve. Unless you're the Penei Sewells, the freaks, the Joe Thomases. Really, there's some time where those guys who are 26 to 30 years old. That's kind of what they're at their prime. So I think you've got to have a mix of guys you get in the later rounds. A guard inside that you like with his lateral movement, maybe get a tackle in free agency, pick up a tackle in the draft early, second, third, early on the second day. And then you go out and you get some skill guys, because skill guys translate earlier than the guys inside, just because of the grown man strength that, guys have. That's why I tell everybody the things that Mason Graham have done has been incredible, because these are grown men he's going against. So I think they got to attack the offensive line. I'd like to see them attack it through free agency to get some older guys, maybe get a lineman or two, and not take a chance, because the chance they took on Zach Zinner, I like that chance, but he's a guy who came back from catastrophic leg injury, and he hasn't been able to come back from that. So they got to go out and get some proven guys, and then they got to get a guy out who can just make a play in space. I don't care. I'm not talking about catch radius and all the stuff that I talk about all the time. I'm talking about a guy who can catch it and make a play with no one else blocking. They haven't had that in a long time.
Coach, great stuff, buddy. Appreciate you. We'll catch up with you next week.
Absolutely. I look forward to that baptism, my friend. I hope I'm a witness.
I want you front row.